Today, I want to invite you into a moment of pause, an opportunity to reflect, to refocus, and to reignite a sense of purpose in your heart. There's a verse in Scripture that's often quoted, sometimes printed on mugs, bookmarks, and graduation cards. But I want us to dig deeper. Let's not just glance at it as a feel-good slogan. Let's sit with it, wrestle with it, and ultimately be transformed by it. That verse is Jeremiah 29:11, where God declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Let that sink in, not just in your mind, but in your soul. I know the plans I have for you. Think about the comfort of those words. In a world filled with uncertainty, confusion, and chaos, there is a God who not only knows you, but knows the road ahead of you. And he's not scrambling for answers. He's not making it up as he goes along. He's not surprised by your detours or discouraged by your delays. He says, I know. There's power in that certainty. Now, it's easy to read this verse and assume it means everything in life will be smooth sailing. But that's not what this promise is about. In fact, when God spoke these words to his people through the prophet Jeremiah, they were in exile. They were far from home, far from comfort, and many of them were far from hope. They were in Babylon, strangers in a foreign land, grappling with loss and confusion. And it was right there, right in that place of displacement and discouragement, that God spoke these words. He didn't wait until they had it all together. He didn't wait until they were strong or comfortable. He spoke hope into the midst of their confusion. And that's exactly what he wants to do in your life today. Maybe you started this day with questions swirling in your mind. Maybe you're wrestling with decisions, burdened by circumstances, or just feeling the weight of not knowing what's next. Maybe you've even questioned whether God still sees you, hears you, or has a plan for you. But hear me, just as God saw his people in exile, he sees you now, and he declares the same truth over you. I know the plans I have for you. What makes this promise so surprising is that it defies human logic. We're trained to believe that success comes from control, that peace comes from predictability, that purpose is found in performance. But God's plan doesn't follow our patterns. His ways are higher than ours. His timing is different, and often his plan unfolds in ways that catch us completely off guard. Yet it's always good. Let's be honest, God's plan doesn't always feel good in the moment. Sometimes it looks like closed doors, unexpected delays, painful losses, or even seasons of silence. But in the midst of those things, God is still working. You see, we often measure our lives by milestones and achievements, but God measures differently. He's more concerned with the shaping of your character than the showcasing of your comfort. He's more interested in who you're becoming than where you're going. And in every twist and turn, he's weaving something far more beautiful than you can imagine. If you could see the full picture of what God is doing in your life, it would blow your mind. But he doesn't show us everything at once. Why? Because if he did, we might run ahead of him, or we might shrink back in fear. Instead, he invites us to walk with him step by step, trusting that each day holds purpose even if we don't understand it yet. This is why starting your day with Jeremiah 29:11 is more than just a nice ritual. It's a declaration of trust. It's a way to center your heart on the truth that God is in control even when you feel out of control. It's a choice to believe that even if today doesn't go as planned, God's plan is still unfolding. It's a way of saying, God, I trust you more than I trust my circumstances. I trust your character even when I can't see your hand. One of the most surprising things about God's plan is that it often takes us through the wilderness before leading us to the promise. We see this throughout Scripture. Joseph had to go through the pit and the prison before reaching the palace. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before leading the Israelites to freedom. David was anointed king as a boy, but spent years on the run before taking the throne. Time and time again, we see that God's process is not rushed, and his plan always involves preparation. Maybe you're in a season that feels like preparation. Maybe you feel hidden, overlooked, or even forgotten. But what if this season is not punishment, but positioning? What if God is using this time to refine you, to strengthen your faith, to deepen your roots, so that when the breakthrough comes, you're ready for it? What if the very thing you're praying for requires a version of you that is still being developed? This is why Jeremiah 29:11 is so powerful. It reminds us that even when we don't see progress, God is still working. Even when we feel stuck, he's still moving. Even when we feel lost, he knows exactly where we are. And the best part, his plans are good. They're not designed to harm you, but to prosper you. That word prosper in the original Hebrew is shalom. It means peace, completeness, wholeness. It's not just about material success. It's about flourishing in every area of your life mentally, emotionally, spiritually. God's plan includes your healing. It includes your growth. It includes reconciliation, restoration, and redemption. His plan includes the dreams you've long forgotten and the ones you've been too afraid to pursue. It includes relationships, opportunities, and divine appointments you haven't even imagined yet. And most importantly, his plan includes drawing you closer to him, because that's where true life begins. Maybe you're thinking, that sounds great, but I've made too many mistakes. Maybe you've walked away from God. Maybe you've taken detours you regret. But here's the beauty of grace. God's plan is not derailed by your past. He doesn't abandon you when you mess up. He doesn't throw away the blueprint of your life because you took a wrong turn. He's the master redeemer. He takes broken pieces and builds beautiful things. He writes stories of restoration that are far better than the ones we would have written for ourselves. God's surprising plan often shows up in unexpected places, in closed doors that later reveal themselves as divine protection, in delays that turn out to be divine appointments, in heartbreaks that birth a deeper sense of purpose. And when you look back, you begin to see that nothing was wasted. Every step, every tear, every prayer, it all had purpose. So how do you live in the light of Jeremiah 29:11? You start by surrendering. You lay down your need to control and choose to trust instead. You begin each day by inviting God into your plans, your thoughts, your decisions. You stay rooted in his word so that your faith is not swayed by circumstances. You walk in obedience, even when the path doesn't make sense. You cultivate gratitude, choosing to focus not just on what you lack, but on how God has been faithful. And when fear tries to creep in, because it will, you remind yourself that the same God who spoke these words over exiled people in Babylon speaks them over you today. You are not forgotten. You are not a mistake. You are not too far gone. You are held in the hands of a God who sees the end from the beginning and calls you his own. There will be days when the plan doesn't make sense. There will be moments when you want to give up. But hold on. Don't let go of hope. Don't stop believing that something beautiful is being birthed even in the midst of your mess. You may not see the full picture yet, but one day you will. And when you do, you'll stand in awe. You'll look back and realize that every delay had a purpose. Every detour led somewhere meaningful, and every moment of doubt was met with grace. So today, as you step into whatever lies ahead, do it with boldness. Do it with faith. Start your day with Jeremiah 29:11 on your lips and in your heart. Let it be the anthem of your soul. Speak it when you feel strong. Speak it when you feel weak. Let it be your anchor and your reminder that your life is not random. You are not drifting. You are being led by a God whose plan is far greater, far more beautiful, and far more surprising than anything you could imagine. Because his plan isn't just about where you're going, it's about who you're becoming. It's about drawing you deeper into his love, his grace, and his purpose. And when you live from that place of trust, when you really begin to believe that God is for you, that he's with you, and that he knows what he's doing, it changes everything. So take a deep breath. Let go of the fear. Let go of the pressure to figure everything out. Start your day with trust. Start your day with faith. Start your day with Jeremiah 29:11 was spoken during a time of exile and hardship. It reminds us that even when life feels completely uncertain, God's plan remains certain, steady and deeply rooted in his goodness. The people of Israel had been taken captive by Babylon. They were living far from their homeland, surrounded by unfamiliar customs, unfamiliar people, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Their entire world had been shaken. Everything they knew, their land, their freedom, their temple, was gone. In the midst of that darkness, God spoke these powerful words, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." This wasn't a message of escape or immediate relief. In fact, just before this verse, God told them that their time in Babylon would last 70 years. That meant that many of the people hearing this message wouldn't live to see the full restoration of their nation. And yet, God still gave them hope. Why? Because his plan was still in place. It had not been canceled by their exile. It had not been disrupted by the power of Babylon. It had not been undone by their past mistakes. God knew exactly where they were, and he was still sovereign over their future. That's the beauty and the mystery of God's plan. It's not dependent on our circumstances. When everything around us changes, God's promise remains. When our emotions are in turmoil, when our plans fall apart, and when our confidence is shaken, God's plan stands firm. He doesn't operate on the same timeline or the same logic that we do. While we see only what's in front of us, he sees the end from the beginning. And in the gap between what we see and what he knows, he calls us to trust. Many times in our own lives, we find ourselves in places that feel like exile. Maybe it's not a physical exile, but an emotional or spiritual one. Maybe you feel cut off from the life you once knew, struggling through the pain of disappointment, the uncertainty of transition, or the weight of grief. Maybe your plans have completely unraveled and you're left asking, what now? In those moments, it's easy to believe that God's plan must have failed, or that he's forgotten about you. But Jeremiah 29:11 speaks directly into that space of doubt. It declares that even in exile, even in confusion, even in suffering, God's plan has not changed. The certainty of God's plan doesn't mean we'll always understand it. It doesn't mean everything will make sense right away. But it does mean we are never alone in the process. When God says, "I know the plans I have for you," he's not just offering information. He's offering reassurance. He's saying, you may not know what's happening next, but I do. You may not see the way forward, but I've already mapped it out. You may feel lost, but I know exactly where you are. This truth invites us to stop trying to figure everything out and start trusting the one who already has. It invites us to shift our focus from the instability of our circumstances to the stability of God's word. The people of Israel needed that reminder. They needed to know that their story wasn't over, that the God who brought them out of Egypt, who led them through the wilderness, who gave them a land of their own, he hadn't abandoned them. He was still writing their story, even in the land of Babylon. And the same is true for us. The world may feel unstable. Your personal life might feel up in the air, but God is still in control. His plan for your life is not reactionary, it's intentional. It's not rushed, it's perfectly timed. And it's not generic. It's uniquely designed for you. The struggles you're facing are not a detour from God's plan. They may very well be part of it. He uses every season, even the painful ones, to draw us closer, to refine us, and to prepare us for what's next. When we truly believe that God's plan is certain, even in uncertain times, we can face each day with a different kind of peace. We don't have to panic when things don't go our way. We don't have to give in to fear when life feels unstable. We can wake up each morning knowing that no matter what happens, God is still working. And because he is, we still have hope. God's plan is often surprising and beyond our understanding. His ways are higher than ours, and the path he takes us on rarely looks like the one we would have chosen for ourselves. We tend to expect direct answers, immediate results, and smooth roads, but God often works through delays, detours, and disruptions. What feels like a setback is not always a step backward. It may be God's way of shifting something inside of us or around us in preparation for what's to come. He sees what we cannot see, and he knows what we do not know. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is going wrong, like doors are closing one after another, and nothing is aligning with what we thought God had planned. In those moments, it's tempting to believe that we're off track or that God has forgotten about us. But more often than not, the surprising turns in our journey are not evidence of God's absence, but confirmation of his active involvement. He is not random. He is not reactive. He doesn't make decisions based on our feelings or our timelines. He's strategic, intentional, and always working with eternity in mind. When we look through Scripture, we find that God rarely worked in the way people expected. He used a stuttering man named Moses to lead an entire nation out of slavery. He chose David, the youngest and least likely son, to be king. He sent Gideon into battle with only a fraction of the army he started with. He allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison, only to raise him up as the second most powerful man in Egypt. None of these people could have predicted how God's plan would unfold in their lives, and most of them faced deep confusion and discouragement in the process. Yet God was never confused. He was always in control, orchestrating something far greater than what they could comprehend in the moment. The same truth applies to us. Sometimes we pray for an open door, and instead, God closes it. We ask for a breakthrough, and it feels like everything is falling apart. We pursue a dream with full faith, only to watch it fade away. It's painful, confusing, and often heartbreaking. But even in those moments, God is not being cruel or indifferent. He may be protecting us from something we cannot see. He may be guiding us to something better than what we imagine, or he may be using the delay to build character, increase our dependence on him, or teach us something we wouldn't learn any other way. There's a kind of spiritual maturity that comes from accepting that we don't have to understand everything to trust God. Faith doesn't always mean clarity. Sometimes it means walking in obedience even when the path doesn't make sense. It means saying, God, I don't get this. I don't like how this feels, but I believe you're still working. That kind of trust isn't easy. It's forged in fire through disappointments, unanswered prayers, and unexpected outcomes. But it's also the kind of trust that transforms us. The surprises in God's plan are often the places where we grow the most. When things go the way we want, it's easy to rely on ourselves. But when nothing makes sense and we have no option but to lean on him, that's when our faith deepens. That's when we realize he is enough, even when the answers don't come quickly. And many times, it's only in hindsight that we begin to see the wisdom in his ways. We look back on what once felt like devastation and realize it was divine redirection. We see how the pain pushed us into prayer. We see how the delay gave us time to mature. We recognize that what we thought was rejection was actually God's protection. We serve a God who is not bound by our understanding. His view is eternal. His timing is perfect, and his love is unwavering, even when we don't understand what he's doing. It's not our job to have all the answers. It's our job to stay close to him, to remain faithful, and to trust that he is working all things together for our good. The surprises in his plan may stretch us, but they are not meant to destroy us. They are meant to prepare us. So when the unexpected happens, instead of assuming the worst, we can choose to believe that something better is being built. We can choose to see the closed door, not as a dead end, but as divine direction. We can choose to believe that God is doing something in us before he does something for us. And in doing so, we begin to live with a deeper trust, a stronger faith, and a steadier hope. Even when his plan surprises us, we can be certain it is good. God's plan is always for our good. That truth is not just a hopeful thought. It's a promise rooted in the very character of God. When he says in Jeremiah 29:11 that his plans are to prosper us and not to harm us, to give us hope and a future, he's revealing something deeper than just temporary relief or surface-level success. The word used in that verse for prosper is the Hebrew word shalom, which means far more than just financial blessing or personal comfort. It speaks of completeness, wholeness, well-being, and deep, abiding peace. It's about being made whole in every area of life, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and relationally. God's plan, then, is not shallow or short-term. It is not about keeping us comfortable or giving us everything we want. It is about making us whole and aligning us with his perfect purpose. Sometimes, when we hear that God's plan is for our good, we immediately associate that with everything going right. We assume it means our prayers will be answered quickly, our dreams will be fulfilled easily, and our lives will be marked by constant favor. But real goodness, the kind God promises, often looks different from what we expect. His definition of good is eternal and rooted in truth, not temporary satisfaction. What we might consider a good plan could actually leave us spiritually shallow or disconnected from Him. On the other hand, what feels difficult or painful in the moment might be the very thing God uses to deepen our faith, open our hearts, and lead us into lasting joy. This is why we can trust God, even when life doesn't go our way. He sees beyond the surface. He knows what we truly need, and He's more committed to our eternal well-being than our immediate gratification. If we could see what He sees, we would choose His plan every time, even if it includes trials, waiting, or unanswered prayers. Because while we often chase happiness, God is after our holiness. While we want quick solutions, God desires lasting transformation. And yet, even in His refining process, He is kind. Even in discipline, He is gentle. His love never fails, and His intentions are never harmful. Some people struggle with trusting God's plan because they've experienced so much hurt. They wonder how a good God could allow such deep pain. But here's the thing. God's goodness doesn't mean we'll never experience suffering. It means that no suffering is ever wasted. It means that even in our darkest moments, He is near and He is working all things together for our good. Even if we can't see it yet, God's good plan includes healing. It includes restoration. It includes purpose, birthed from pain and wisdom forged in the fire. It includes growth we didn't ask for but needed desperately. It includes relationships being mended, identities being reclaimed, and broken places being made whole again. This kind of good cannot be manufactured by human effort. It is the supernatural work of a God who knows how to bring beauty from ashes and life from what seemed dead. Sometimes the evidence of God's good plan is subtle. It's not always dramatic or immediate. It might look like the peace that steadies your heart in the middle of chaos. It might look like strength rising up in you when you thought you had nothing left. It might look like the gentle whisper of His presence when everyone else walks away. God's goodness is often revealed in the quiet, hidden places, in the steady unfolding of His faithfulness over time. When we truly begin to believe that His plan is always for our good, it changes the way we approach life. We stop striving to control everything and start surrendering with confidence. We stop measuring God's love by our circumstances and start trusting that He's at work even when we don't understand. We begin to walk with hope, not because we know what's coming next, but because we know the one who does. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all is this. The goodness of God's plan is not dependent on our performance. It's rooted in His grace. We don't earn it, we receive it. We don't have to have perfect faith, just a willing heart. Even when we fail, even when we wander, even when we question, His plan remains good. He continues to pursue us, to guide us, and to lead us into the fullness of what He created us to be. So when life feels uncertain, when prayers go unanswered, and when the path ahead is unclear, remember this. God's plan is not to harm you. He has not forgotten you. He is not punishing you. He is working, shaping, building something within you and around you that will ultimately reveal His goodness. Trust in that. Hold on to that. Because the God who promised you a future and a hope will never fail to fulfill what He started. God redeems our mistakes and detours. That truth brings incredible comfort, especially for those who carry the weight of regret, failure, or a past that seems too broken to fix. We often believe that once we've messed up, missed an opportunity, or taken the wrong path, we've disqualified ourselves from God's best for our lives. But that's not how God works. His grace doesn't have an expiration date. His mercy doesn't run out when we fall short. And His plan for us doesn't vanish when we take a detour. Instead, God has this incredible way of taking our brokenness and weaving it into His greater purpose, making something beautiful out of what we thought was ruined. We are quick to label ourselves by our failures. We think, I blew it, I should have known better. I wasted too much time. God can't use someone like me. But God doesn't label us by our worst moments. He calls us by our true identity, beloved, chosen, redeemed, and restored. When we come to Him, no matter how far we've strayed, He doesn't scold us with shame. He meets us with grace. He doesn't remind us of what we did wrong. He reminds us of who we are and what he can still do through our lives. Throughout the Bible, we see stories of people who failed deeply, but were still used powerfully. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, but Jesus still chose him to help build the church. Moses killed a man and ran away in fear, but God called him back to lead his people to freedom. David committed adultery and murder, yet God still referred to him as a man after his own heart. The Apostle Paul persecuted Christians, yet he became one of the greatest evangelists in history. Their mistakes didn't disqualify them from God's purpose. Instead, their redemption became part of the testimony that pointed others to God's goodness. When we try to run from our past or bury it in shame, we rob ourselves of the healing and redemption God wants to bring. He doesn't waste anything, not even our worst choices. What the enemy intends for harm, God can use for good. That doesn't mean our actions don't have consequences, but it does mean that our failures don't have to define us. They can be transformed into platforms for grace, growth, and testimony. God doesn't just fix what's broken. He repurposes it. He uses our wounds to bring healing to others. He uses our story to remind someone else that they are not beyond hope. Sometimes the detours we take are not because of sin or failure, but simply because we made decisions without full clarity. We took a job, entered a relationship, moved to a place, or pursued a dream, and it didn't work out. We might feel like we lost valuable time or missed the right path, but even then, God is not limited. He's not sitting back waiting for us to find our way back to the original plan. He meets us right where we are and continues his work. He knows how to bring beauty from ashes. He knows how to reroute us without wasting the journey. It's important to realize that God's sovereignty includes our free will. He knows we will stumble. He knows we will make choices that lead to pain or setbacks. But he also knows how to use every single piece of our story for his glory. Nothing is wasted in the hands of the Redeemer. Every mistake becomes a canvas for his grace. Every detour becomes a chance for deeper dependence on him. Every failure becomes an opportunity to encounter his mercy in a new way. So if you're walking through life carrying shame or regret, thinking it's too late for you or that you've missed your moment, hear this clearly. God is not done with you. Your story isn't over. In fact, it may just be getting started. The very thing you're ashamed of may become the testimony that sets someone else free. The very place you feel broken may be where God does his most powerful work. His plan for you includes redemption, not just survival. He wants to restore what was lost, heal what was hurt, and use it all for a purpose greater than you could imagine. God is not afraid of your past. He's not limited by your failures. He is the God who restores, who makes all things new, and who writes stories of hope out of the messiest chapters. Trust that no matter how far you've wandered, his arms are still open. He hasn't changed his mind about you. He still calls you, still sees you, and still has a purpose for you. When we give him our broken pieces, he doesn't throw them away. He uses them to create something far more beautiful than we ever thought possible. Faith requires trusting God step by step, not all at once. It's not about having the entire roadmap in front of us or being certain of every detail in advance. It's about moving forward even when all we can see is the next step. That kind of faith doesn't come naturally. It grows through time, experience, and often discomfort. We live in a world that values control, speed, and clarity. But faith calls us into a different rhythm. It invites us to release our grip on certainty and to place our trust in a God who sees the beginning and the end when we can only see the present moment. There's something powerful about learning to trust God day by day. It's not that he can't show us the full picture. He absolutely can, but often he chooses not to, and that's not to frustrate us. It's to teach us how to depend on him. If we saw everything ahead of time, we'd likely rely on our own understanding and strength. But when the path is unclear, when the timing is uncertain, and when the outcome isn't guaranteed, we're invited into deeper communion with him. We're invited to surrender not just our future, but our today. Obedience and surrender go hand in hand with this step-by-step trust. It's one thing to say we trust God. It's another to walk in obedience even when we don't understand. It's in the daily choices, choosing patience when we want to rush, choosing integrity when compromise is easier, choosing prayer when anxiety creeps in, that we demonstrate real faith. And those small acts of obedience, though they may seem insignificant at the time, are often the very moments where God is doing his most important work in us. Every step we take in faith prepares us for the next. Every yes we give to God, no matter how small, is part of the unfolding of his greater plan. One of the reasons walking step by step with God can be difficult is because we crave results. We want to see progress. We want signs that things are working. But faith often feels quiet, slow, and even invisible. There are seasons where you might feel like you're not moving at all, like nothing is changing. But just because you can't see the fruit yet doesn't mean the roots aren't growing deep. Just because you don't have the full picture doesn't mean the picture doesn't exist. God is always working behind the scenes, arranging what needs to be arranged, shaping what needs to be shaped, and aligning what needs to be aligned. And sometimes the step we're called to take doesn't make sense. God might ask you to forgive when your heart still hurts. He might ask you to stay when you want to leave, or to leave when you're comfortable staying. He might ask you to give when it feels like you don't have much, and in those moments, you might be tempted to hold back, to wait for more information or more clarity. But faith doesn't wait for full understanding. It moves forward in trust. It says, God, I don't have all the answers, but I trust you enough to take this next step. There is also a beauty in learning to rest in God's timing. When we walk step by step with him, we learn that delays aren't always denials. What feels like waiting might actually be preparation. God is not slow, he's intentional. He knows when the timing is right, not just for your circumstances, but for your heart. He wants you to be ready for the blessings he has for you. And readiness doesn't come from rushing, it comes from trusting. It comes from letting go of your timeline and embracing his. In the end, faith is less about understanding everything and more about being willing to follow even when you don't. It's about choosing trust over control, surrender over striving, and obedience over comfort. And it's in that daily, step-by-step walk with God that we begin to experience the depth of his presence and the unfolding of his promises. We may not always know where the path leads, but we can know the one who leads us. And that is enough. So whatever step God is calling you to take, whether it's a step of faith, a step of healing, a step of forgiveness, or simply the decision to keep going, take it. Even if it's small, even if you're afraid, because each step in faith moves you closer to the life God has designed for you. And in time, you'll look back and realize that every uncertain step was part of a very certain plan, one that was always good, always purposeful, and always guided by a loving hand. Starting each day with the promise found in Jeremiah 29:11 anchors our hearts and minds in a way that nothing else can. In a world that bombards us with uncertainty, stress, and constant noise, taking a moment to reflect on God's promise gives us the clarity and strength we need to face the day. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. These words, though originally spoken to the Israelites during their exile, carry timeless truth that still speaks into our lives today. They remind us that God is in control, that he sees us, and that his intentions toward us are always good. When we begin our day with this promise, we are doing more than reading a verse. We are choosing a mindset. We are choosing to align our perspective with the reality of God's sovereignty and love, rather than the chaos of our emotions or circumstances. It's easy to wake up already overwhelmed. Thoughts of deadlines, family responsibilities, health concerns, or unanswered questions can cloud our minds before we even get out of bed. But when we pause and center ourselves in the truth of Jeremiah 29:11, everything begins to shift. Fear begins to lose its grip. Worry starts to fade. And in its place, a quiet confidence begins to grow, not because we know how the day will go, but because we know who is going with us through it. This promise also invites us to live with intention. It reminds us that we are not wandering aimlessly through life. We are not victims of randomness or fate. We are part of a divine story written by a God who has a plan for us, a plan that includes purpose, growth, hope, and future. When we start the day with that truth, we are more likely to live with purpose in our conversations, our work, and even in the quiet moments. We begin to recognize that every part of our day matters because every part of our life is held in God's hands. It also helps us fight the lies that creep in subtly. Throughout the day, we may be tempted to believe we're not enough, that we're falling behind, or that our lives don't have real meaning. But when we've started the day with the reminder of God's promises, we have something to combat those lies. We can say, "No, I may not feel strong right now, but I am walking in God's plan. I may not see how this will work out, but I know He has a future for me. I may feel uncertain, but my life is not without direction." Even when we face challenges or things don't go according to our plans, this promise gives us a deeper anchor. It helps us respond differently. Instead of reacting in fear, we can respond in faith. Instead of spiraling into frustration, we can pause and ask, "God, how are you working through this?" We begin to view difficulties not as dead ends, but as detours that still fall within God's overarching plan for our lives. We develop spiritual resilience not because everything goes our way, but because our hope is rooted in something stronger than circumstances. Making Jeremiah 29:11 part of your daily rhythm doesn't require a long devotional or a perfect quiet time. It could be as simple as whispering it in prayer before you get out of bed, writing it on a sticky note and putting it on your mirror, meditating on it during your commute. Whatever the form, the power is in the reminder. It's in choosing to let that truth be the first voice you listen to each day, rather than the noise of worry, stress, or negativity. Over time, this daily anchoring begins to shape the way you live. You walk with more boldness because you're not relying solely on your own strength. You're leaning into a divine plan. You take risks in faith because you trust that God is ordering your steps. You extend grace more easily because you know you're part of something bigger than just the immediate. And even on the hard days, you hold on to hope because you believe that God's story for you is not finished. Starting each day with this promise is not about ignoring reality or pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing to root yourself in truth before the world tries to convince you otherwise. It's about letting God's voice be louder than your fears. And it's about remembering that no matter what today holds, you are not alone, you are not forgotten, and your life has purpose. Jeremiah 29:11 is more than a nice verse. It's a daily anchor, a spiritual reset, and a reminder that the God who spoke those words then is still speaking them over you today. When you live from that place of promise, each day becomes an opportunity not just to survive, but to live with faith, courage, and expectant hope.